Deep in the high mountains on Immerwald, a Gree had anchored itself in and built a mining facility. When the evacuation order was issued, there was nothing it could do other than barricade itself in. All the miners left on the shuttles except for two, humans Stuart and Stella, who had come on an excursion to live a true life away from their charge space deep within the KMI. The two humans continued as normal, running the boring machine deep in the lower tunnels. The Gree of the mines grew tendrils behind them, anchoring the walls, absorbing metals and pumping air from the surface down to them. Stuart and Stella were humans, however, and they came back up after their scheduled shift to eat, relieve themselves, wash, and rest. The two sat at the central lunch table, eating from ration packs. "Hey, Gree," Stuart asked. The Gree replied, breathing heavily through the overhead ductworks. "Yes, Stuart? Is everything all right?" "We're eventually going to run out of rations. Stella and I love mining. Hell, we built our empires on it, but we have to have a food supply. What are your thoughts on opening up temporarily so we can go scout?" The Gree of the mine moved cameras around so as to see them easier, looking over the two humans' features. "Yes, I understand," it said. "It is risky, but so is the reality of starvation. We have the one terrestrial shuttle. It has hover capabilities. You could scout with it." Stella swallowed a bite of stewed carrots and then spoke up. "Stuart, that Callie girl, she is out there. You saw the footage. She tore up the Alpha base on that island. She's out of her mind. She could hurt us, or absorb us, or something. I know, Stella. I don't want that, but we have to get some form of agriculture going, or this base is going to fail. If we die, this is going to fail," she said. "Look," he continued. "We got a planet full of resources at our disposal. We got Gree here with some forges. It can make shit. Hell, it made this whole facility. We can make gear. Think of it like a raid. We just gotta gear up properly." Stella smiled. "We need suits. Big suits." Stuart nodded, grinning. "Now you're getting it. We suit up. Wreck some of those purple things. Fuck this bitch up." Stuart turned and looked over at the camera eye. "Gree, if we get biomaterial, can you process it?" The Gree of the mine thought for a moment. "I could, but I will have to craft some tools. We could dig out some chambers, maybe make a sluice, and then I can make some rendering vats. I have to admit I'm kind of stupid about your kind. I don't know much about you other than you need those food packs, water, and your air mix." Stella spun on her seat to make eye contact with the Gree's camera. "Well, crap. We could dump in organics all day, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to poison us. You got any medical files? Maybe something illustrating our digestive tracts?" Stuart shook his head. "Man, sometimes I miss our Kama hard. She never had issues like this." Stella turned and looked at him. "Cammy knew humans from day one. She could pull us apart and put us back together younger, stronger, and smarter all day long. Give the Gree some credit, it's trying. I want to help you too. If you don't survive, then I will be alone here with her out there. Gree don't do well alone." Stella took another bite, staring at Stuart. After she swallowed, she spoke up. "I got an idea." "Yeah?" he asked. "The Alpha base, that habitus where Callie was based, it had a preserver thing there. The lab was left behind, lots of shit, right?" Stuart smiled. "Yeah, preservers preserve." "Exactly," she said, pointing her fork at him. "That preserver worked with people, probably kept lots of logs for their nest hoard or whatever. It probably has logs on humans. It has to write." The Gree of the mine sighed through its tubes. "That is genius, Stella. My forebears have worked lots with preservers. I will be able to piece that data out. That is brilliant, but do you think anything there is intact?" Stuart shrugged. "What you think?" he said at Stella. "You want to do a raid with me?" She smiled at him. "Fire up the flames, burn down the boss. Get the loot or it's a loss," he replied. Stella had used a borer and carved out a new wing over the course of 3 days. Stuart had busied himself working the molds and forges, progressing on the suits. The two would meet up and converse about their progress over meals, and spent their evenings sleeping in their armored bunker. The Gree of the mine, not needing a full sleep, spent the evenings digging roots into the mountain, pulling out ores, and storing them in pre-built warehouse rooms. Stella finished up her wing on the 4th day, sweeping it out, and the Gree grew in to provide light and optics. Stella carted table parts in and assembled them. She then started assembling the prefabricated parts and installed a set of smaller printers. She removed her arm display and hooked it into the newly put-together terminal. Stella looked over everything, and then looked up at the new camera placement. "I'm going to try printing an upper. Wish me luck." The air vents above whispered back. "Wishing you luck now, Stella," the Gree said. She dumped the metal mix into the hopper and started the sequence. The machine began melting the mix down, funneling it onto the print plate. Layer by layer, the main frame for a frag cannon was laid out. She stopped assembling a stool to check her progress. "Oh, nice. It's working, Gree. We're in business." She touched her earcom. "Hey, Stewart. The new forge room is operational. I'm starting on the guns. Suits are coming along. How many days you think you'll need?" he replied. "At least another week. I don't want to run out of rounds." "Definitely. All right. I'll have the suits done in a couple days if I don't mess anything up. I guess I'll use the extra days to outfit the grav transport. Maybe put armor or something on it," he said. "All right. We on for dinner tonight?" she asked. "Of course. Wouldn't miss it. You don't have to ask me every day." She smiled to herself. "Yeah, I do. You might change your mind." "Doubt it. How long we been together?" She leaned in and looked at the barrel. "No idea. Too long probably." Stella replied. "You know, we could just build a radio tower, all for a lift from the orbital." She looked up at the camera. "No, this is our mine. This is our Gree. I'm not going to let some alien bitch monster force us off our strike." He laughed into his calm. "I love you, Stella. Don't ever change." The two humans kept working their projects to completion. The Gree of the mine focused on reinforcing tunnels and extending the 3 smokestacks on the surface. The stacks were continuously pumping out heavy ash and radioactive dust now, layering the nearby mountains with a layer of toxic soot. Plants in the nearby valley were withering. Aquatic creatures in the streams washed ashore, poisoned and full of rot. A quadruped herbivore stood staring at the 3 smokestacks in the high mountains. Its eyes took it in, feeding the location through the filaments in its fingered feet into the ground. Stella and Stewart were sitting at their final meal before their journey, eating bits of cake with lasagna. Stella smiled at him. "You ready?" He nodded, cleaning his teeth with his tongue. "Yup. We get the data. Maybe some equipment if there is any. Should be an easy trip." The Gree of the mine spoke through the cafeteria's vents. "I will worry for you two. I will miss you too." Stella smiled over at the camera. "Gree, you don't have to worry. We got this. We've been doing raids for over a century now. We got our suits, our guns, and our hovercraft. We will be in and out." The Gree sighed. "But she is everywhere now. We don't know what she will do to you. If you don't come home, I will be alone. Sad." Stewart touched his display pad, then looked over at the Gree camera. "Tell you what, bud. You focus on getting an antenna up this next couple days. I will record the trip, and when I get to the old base, I'll sync it in and broadcast so you know how we're doing. If by some freak occurrence the squishy organics of this planet manage to best our rigs, you can always call the orbital and ask for help." The Gree looked at the 2 humans through the cameras. It stood still in its antechamber, tall, roots and limbs stretching out through the empty room. "I am fond of you two. You stayed. You are good workers. You have helped me build deep, strong tunnels. Not many Gree have had the honor of having creatures as smart, capable, and friendly as you two. I am blessed in the time we have had, and am thankful. I wish you safe journey. I hope you come home." Stella finished her cake and sat down her fork. She smiled over at the camera. "We're blessed to be here with you, Gree." She looked over at Stewart. "Well, after dinner you ready?" He took another bite of his cake and sipped a bit of lemonade. "Yeah, I'm ready now. Let's go suit up and get on the rig." She nodded. "We'll be as safe as we can, Gree." "I hope so." The metal tree-like creature replied. The two humans boarded the grav-assisted hovercraft. Stewart hauled aboard 5 crates of rounds, and Stella primed the engines. She looked over the readings. "Good. Full tank. Should be able to make it there and back several times over." He nodded in his suit. "Yup. I pulled a canister from the mothballed lander. Pretty good, huh?" He looked over and smiled at her. "You are proving handy. All these years I didn't figure the simulation would translate as well into the real as it has." He stood up, still smiling. "Well, shall we go?" She spoke into the comm. "Gree, you ready to open up the hangar door?" "Opening now," the Gree of the mine replied. A groan reverberated through the tunnels as the outer door opened up. It clanged as its door lip slid into place. Then the middle door slid open, clanging, and then was followed by the opening of the inner blast door. The two humans instinctively gasped as they saw sunlight for the first time in months. The light bounced off brighter, reflected off the snowy mountains. Stella slowly piloted the hovercraft out of the hangar and paused it over the blackened slope leading down towards the valley. She pointed across the valley to the area below the snow line. "You see that?" Stewart looked and saw what she was pointing at. The valley was a bright green, except for that one area, which had large purple lettering written with flowers. It read, "I know you are there." He looked over at Stella and then touched his comm. "Gree, shut the doors tight. Ready your defenses. She's been watching the mountain." "Doing so now." The Gree replied, and the doors started shutting. Stella nodded over at Stewart. "Well, here we go to adventure." To adventure. Stewart lounged in his metal suit, stretched on the bow of the ship. They whisked through the valley, following the creek as it grew larger and fuller, passing from one valley to the next. They eventually reached the shore and followed the beach for a bit. Stella looked at her GPS instrumentation. "Looks like 400 kilometers of ocean before the island. Are you ready?" Stewart, looking forward, pointed out to the sea. "Tally-ho!" Stella turned the wheel and maximized thrust. "Here we go." The two sped out into the vast blue. The ripples caused by the craft disturbed schools of microscopic filter feeders and clumps of algae. Signals sped out through the fiber networks. Stewart slowly stood up, looking out. He turned and looked at Stella. "She knows where we are." Stella, without slowing, looked out, focusing on the water. It had started churning as creatures broke the surface and stared at them. Tentacles coiled, flippered things leapt out from the wave tops, and mouths slowly gaped open and closed. She gulped hard. "This might not be as easy as we thought, Stu." He nodded slowly and pushed the button for the glass in his helmet to defog. "Did you want to turn back?" "And do what? We're on a timer. Eventually we're going to starve." "Maybe we can talk to her," he said. "Maybe she'll eat our brains and make us one of her zombie animals," she replied. Stewart stared out at the water full of eye-like organs staring back. He raised up a hand and waved. The multitudes lifted appendages, waving back in the thousands as they sped by. The island came into sight and grew in size quickly as they approached. A dozen purple titanic creatures stood guard, waiting for them to near. Stewart waved at Stella. "Circle around. See if they let us in." Stella started the approach when she noticed a blinking dot on the radio. She reached over and turned up the volume. A beep, 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 dash, 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 beep, beep, beep echoed from the speaker. She looked over at Stewart. "Someone is calling an SOS." Stewart shook his head, lifting his arm cannon to the ready. "No one's here. It's got to be her." He pointed at a gap between the Titans. "There. We can go in there." She looked. "What if they try and grab us?" "Then that is a sign of hostility and I start blasting." She nodded and turned the hovercraft toward the beach. She watched as they reached the point in between the two towering sea creatures. They turned their heads to watch, but didn't attack. She pushed the grav up and pushed the craft over the tree canopy. The leaves underneath stirred and vibrated. "We're in," she said. He nodded. "Keep going. It's just ahead, isn't it?" She nodded back. "Over the next rise, we should see it." The remnants were there. Several shattered-out buildings and a landing structure still existed. Stella brought the craft toward a plastic-covered clearing and lowered it down. Stuart readied himself, frag cannons fully loaded. Stella touched the craft down. "All right, in and out. I think that landing building was where the preserver lab was. We check there, get all we can, get out." "You good?" she said as she loaded her fraggers. He nodded and hopped off the craft onto the mat. "Hurry up, woman." She hopped down beside him. "You're the one holding us up, man." The two humans walked off the mat toward the buildings. Stuart noticed a pack of arboreal creatures watching from the treetops overhead. He motioned for her to look. Stella noticed. "So far, so good," she said. Stuart neared the door and slid it out of the way. "So far," he replied. The two entered and turned on their helmet lights, guns pointed. Inside the building, they heard a radio echoing the SOS. Stuart turned, aiming his lights at the sound, and saw it. Stella followed suit and gasped. Standing at one of the terminals was a pile of shelled creatures and worms, heaped in a vaguely humanoid shape. The mass was reaching out, pushing the radio's button. Creatures fell off and crawled away, only to find their way back into the mass again. Stuart raised his hand. "Hi, Callie? Are you Callie?" The mass reached with several worms and pushed the button, holding it down. Stella lowered her fraggers and took a step closer. "Hi, Callie. We're from the mountain facility. You probably know that already. We saw the flowers. That was you, right?" The mass shifted, causing several coiled creatures to fall off. It lifted its worm-made appendage and then pushed the button again, causing it to scree. Stella nodded. "Tell you what, 1 for yes, 2 for no. That doable?" The worms moved off the button and then hit it shortly once. "Good. Are you Callie?" Stella asked. 1 button press. "Oh, good. We wanted to keep mining up there. You said we could have it. We have a document and everything. That good with you?" 1 button press, then 2 button presses. Stuart looked at Stella. "What did that mean?" Stella shrugged, still staring at the heap of forest floor decomposers. "Well, I don't know what that means, so I'll take that as a maybe." 1 button press. Stella chuckled dryly. "Good, all right. We can work with maybe. Okay. Well, we are hoping to find some of the preserver's data. We are low on food, and our gree doesn't know what is safe to feed us. If we get that data, we hope we can rig up a grow-op or something. We don't want to starve. Can we look through here for that?" 1 button press. Stella nodded. "Thank you. We're going to get looking then." 2 button presses. Stella and Stuart stopped mid-step. Stella looked back at the mass, the numerous eyes glinting in the light. "You don't want us to look for it?" The mass lifted its arm and pointed at the wall. Stella slowly turned and looked. Thousands of crawling creatures coiled and grasped along the wall, spelling out words. "You help me." They spelled out and then shifted. "I help you." Stella looked back at the mass. "What do you need help with?" Stuart watched the words shape on the wall, saying them over the comm to Stella. "You will get food. You will get grape juice files. You will build ship. I will get sun." Stella nodded. "All right, that's doable. We get to keep our mine?" Stuart started reading again. "You will stop polluting. You keep mine then." Stella looked at Stuart. "Sounds doable. What you say, hun?" A large thud outside caused Stuart to look back at the door, and he only saw a large purple claw. "Yup. Sounds doable. I say we agree to it." Stella looked back into the mass. "All right, Callie. Lead the way to the files." The mass shifted and started toward the interior of the dilapidated facility. The two humans followed cautiously. The Infinigan shipyard was bustling with workers. Cargo sleds ferrying metal pieces left the massive tarped area, only to return moments later empty and ready for another load. The rest of the yard was occupied manning the smelters and ingot racks. Nash Smile was busy tallying the ingot line when she noticed Sam and his entourage walking down the causeway. Nash Smile touched her earcom, speaking over the yard channel. "Everyone on alert. We have a guest." Another voice rose up on the channel in human. "Nash Smile. All Infinigan present. The rouse is up. Present yourselves for inspection." It was Orbit. The AI swept through the machinery, bringing the yard to a safe stop. Infinigan all over laid down their tools and eyed the peoples on the causeway. Nash Smile stowed her datapad into her overalls and ran towards the edge of the catwalk. In one movement she jumped, kicked off the railing, and did a backflip. She landed on the causeway next to her older sister Heckletooth. She adjusted her breather and took out her datapad. Heckletooth noted her sister's landing with an ear bobbing, and then looked Sam in the eyes and stared. "How can I help you, Mr. President?" she said in slurred human. Sam looked at her, and then passed her at the massive cordoned area. "Nice you're learning my language. You know why I'm here?" She pointed over her shoulder with her upper right hand. "You mean that?" "Yes. The Callistode. You should have declared it before you even leapt into the rift to retrieve it. Why? Why did you try to keep this?" Heckletooth stared at him, unmoving. "You don't own us, Sam. We are a free people. We do what we want." Sam moved his eyes to meet hers. "Your people, doing what they want, got them extinct. I've done nothing but help you. You know that is a human ship. That is my ship. Why did you do this?" Heckletooth looked past him at the dozen armed soldiers with their rifles ready. Humans, Tar, Craddock were all easily identifiable in their armor. She looked back at him. "You left the Infinigan officers back at the station?" Sam slowly nodded. "I don't want to fight, Heckletooth. Our people are allies. Just surrender the Callistode. My people risked their lives in the rift to pull this wreck in. The same forces that ripped apart your crew ripped apart a dozen of my workers. We paid in bodies to get this here. It is ours." Sam sighed. "What do you want for it?" 5 million clams. Sam listened as Orbit tallied numbers in his ear. He shook his head. "I don't need the whole ship. I just need to conduct an investigation and remove the AI on board. Let me do that, and the rest is yours." Her ears bobbed. "The weapon systems? You going to wage war on me next?" She cocked her head. "No, we don't have a quarrel with you. You are the one here armed." Sam nodded. "Keep them. Hell, your people have fought for the Clouder enough. Take them." She looked at her little sister. Nash Smile held up a figure on the datapad. Heckletooth looked back at Sam. "That AI is worth a fortune on its own. Your species' programming skills are impressive. I don't think we want to part with it." Sam took in a deep breath through his breather. "Well, you are going to part with it. I'll give you 100,000 clams for your effort, and you can scrap out the rest after the investigation." Heckletooth looked over the situation, tonguing her teeth. Nash Smile took a step back. Heckletooth raised up her hands, pointing at him with open fingers. "We have rights, Sam. We pulled it out. We own it. It is ours. It is our right. It is my people's ship. My crewmates are dead inside there unless you've removed them already. But tell you what, Heckletooth, say you do want to force this issue. This entire shipyard is rented space, isn't it? Or do you own it?" Heckletooth looked over at her sister. Nash Smile pulled up the file and looked up. "It is still under mortgage with the bank," the younger Infinigan said. "Why bring that up, Sam?" Sam looked at the two sisters back and forth. "Your loan can be called due at a moment's notice should the board will it. Do you know who is on the board?" Heckletooth tilted her head, lowering her arms. "I bet you in the Orbit." Sam nodded. Yup, and a few others who I could call in favors. Not to mention your people are good at rubbing others the wrong way. You know there's a pack of your young that routinely robs the SFP farms of fruits. SFP isn't too happy about it. Heckletooth nodded, mimicking Sam. 100,000 for the AI. You do your investigation, we keep the ship, and we get the weapon system. Sam smiled. Correct. Now let me aboard my ship. Heckletooth looked at her sister, and then the two stepped toward the railing, letting the entourage pass. Sam walked the halls of his deployed ship, running his fingers over the metal and plastic surfaces. He passed a dried corpse with long hair. He thought he recognized her despite her withered features. Orbit, you seeing everything? Yeah. Your ICOM is broadcasting fine. Am I heading the right way? Yes, the AI said. Next door on your left should be my main communications relay. Sam walked up to the door and pushed. It slid a bit, and then with a heave, it opened up wide enough for him to enter. He stepped in and looked around. The room was gutted, wires hung loose from the wall, and the racks were empty of equipment. Orbit highlighted a wire hanging from the ceiling in his HUD. That one. Attach the clip and my primary will be able to transmit. Sam reached up and clipped the transmitter onto the cord. Done. You working? Yes. We're communicating already. Turns out I got pretty lonely out there. Sam nodded. Get caught up with each other. I'm going to walk around. We will, Sam, but I'll keep an eye on you as well. Moving two of the guard over to you. Sam nodded. Thanks, Orbit. No problem, sir. Don't need to sir anymore, Orbit. I know Sam, but sometimes you need it. Sam walked for a while in the ship, and then exited back down the ramp. A dozen human crews were already on board and activating the lighting systems. He didn't bother watching, but rather continued out of the shipyard. He turned and entered the mall ring. Sam walked past the arcade and smiled. Inside, several senators were running one of the VR sims. Sam kept walking and stopped at the Hagfish Hall. He walked down the dark corridor and stopped next to the black opening before their main entrance. Shineless's and his captain's face peeked out from the blackness, its massive finger-like mandibles protruding from its mouth as the Guardian growled lowly. Sam held out his hand. You know me, girl. I'm not causing any problem. The creature pushed its head forward, meeting his waiting hand. He rubbed Hit's head, scratching its ragged red hair. Be a good girl. Don't get into any more trouble. He kept petting it for a few more minutes, and then turned, walking back toward the mall. Sam entered a Craddock shop and bought a large bottle of malt liquor and exited back out onto the concourse. He watched the numerous denizens walking, crawling, and floating by for a bit. He slugged back a few gulps and started walking again. His feet carried him past dozens of busy shops, restaurants, and gathering rooms. One of Asterian's tours came by, and he waved at them, smiling. Asterian noticed the bottle and gave Sam a look. Sam shrugged and kept walking. Down in the deep of the inner waterholds, Zemudins was resting and idly designing new habitats. He was adamant about the newly imposed safety ordinances and was integrating numerous overlays and redundancies. He was drawing out a schematic for a Fuimos atrium when a chunk of crystallized silica landed on his aft tentacle. Zemudins drew the green bit of glass close to his eye and looked it over. Little light reached this deep, but enough did that his large eye could make out the edges and glints of the piece. As he looked it over, another larger piece floated past him. He reached out and caught it up in another of his tentacles. He looked up and noticed 3 more. He grabbed them and proceeded toward the surface. Zemudins crested the surface and noticed Sam sitting on the walkway next to several broken bottles. The human was skipping the chunks of glass across the water. Zemudins ducked back under and swam closer. He resurfaced next to Sam. Hello, Sam. Are you all right? Sam threw another chunk out. That one made it 7. That's pretty good. Zemudins had watched. 7 bounces? That is good. I don't understand. Why are you throwing trash into my habitat? Sam looked over at the mass of meat, tentacles, mouth, and eye. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... well, it's a thing. I miss skipping stones. You know? No. Sam shrugged and then looked at the pile of glass shards. He then looked at his hands and noticed the drops of blood lining the creases of his fingers. Oh, shit. Well, I think I'm hurt. Sam, you seem unwell. I'm going to call the hospital. I got him, a voice called out. Zamudins looked down the walkway to see the preserver walking slowly down the path. The preserver raised one of its 3 hands. Hey, Sam, I came to get you. Orbit said you needed assistance. Sam looked back down at the glass. Yeah, I broke bottles. Zamudin's not happy with me. The preserver lowered his body down next to Sam. Don't worry about that, Sam. Can't you hear Orbit? Sam shook his head. No. He pulled his comm out of his pocket. I wanted some time alone. The 3-eyed creature looked over the human. Sam, you're bleeding. He reached over and grabbed Sam's hands. You have several cuts. Come with me. I will repair you. Sam stood up with the preserver and then turned and pointed. The glass. Zemodanes doesn't need my mess. The preserver had to actively pull Sam away to stop him from reaching down and cutting his hands more. Sam, there are box spiders coming to clean it up. Zemodans will be fine. You will be forgiven. Come on. Sam nodded and looked over at the behemoth floating nearby. I'm sorry for messing up your habitat. Zemudins blinked slowly. It is okay, Sam. It will be cleaned. Go, get yourself fixed. Sam nodded. I'll go get fixed. Sam walked with the preserver and exited the ocean grower habitat. The 2 walked through the station back toward the zoo to get him fixed up. Sam woke up to a little hand playing with his nose. Sam laughed immediately upon opening his eyes and seeing little Langdon giggling above him. Sam looked a bit farther and saw Olivia holding their child. Hey! He started looking around. Olivia shook her head. Figures. You get drunk and end up in a zoo. Sam sat up and realized he was on one of the preserver's operating tables. He immediately ran his hands over his body. Oh, good. No cuts. Everything seems in place. She smiled. Yeah, he took good care of you. He called me up last night. Orbit said you weren't in a good place. Sam nodded a bit. Yeah. You hear? The Callistode? She asked. Yeah, he said. I saw them. They're still in there, fried as the day it happened. She leaned in and hugged him. Langdon pulled on his ear. Sam smiled as a tear rolled over his right cheek. I miss them sometimes. I didn't socialize a lot, but the other maintenance guys were nice to me. She squeezed him a bit more. It's okay. You're safe here. You're with your family. Why me? He said, crying now. Why didn't I die with them? Olivia eased up and sat on the table beside him. I don't know. Guess you had a bit of luck. She looked over at their son and rubbed his head. I'm glad you did. Sam smiled as he looked at their baby. I'm glad too. She looked up at Sam and their eyes met. He needs his dad. I need you too. Sam cried a bit more and hugged her again. I know. You don't have to worry about that. She put her finger over one of his exposed chest holes, and it whistled as the machine in his chest sucked in air. I worry anyway. He looked down, nodding slightly. It's hard. I'm done with this bullshit. I just want to relax. She laughed. Could you, though? He looked at her askew. Yeah, I could relax. She raised her hand around the room. Micah has a massage parlor now. You funded Asterian's park along with the schools. We have a hall of it at home. All the luxuries here, and you never use them. You're always doing some deal, talking with some politician or fighting something. I don't think you could rest if you wanted to, Sam. He looked at the table. I rest. She placed her hand on his. You rest when it is your last option. You go and go and go and you're exhausted. Sam looked up across the room, noticing the preserver at work at a far table. He looked back at Olivia. Things have to be done. She shook her head. Other people can do them. He looked her in the eyes, shaking his own head. No. You know what they say here. The void is just on the other side of the hull. We always have to be working against it. You know this. And you are, she said quietly. We are. Everyone is. All of this has spread to dozens of worlds. He nodded. I'll try. She leaned in and kissed him. Good. That's all I ask. She quickly slapped his shoulder. You hungry? I got waffle batter made up. He nodded. Did we get any blueberries in yet? She shook her head as she stood up, Langdon resting on her hip. No, but the strawberries came in 2 days again. They're pretty good, grazer grown. Nice. Eggs? Scrambled or sunny side today? She asked. I want scrambled today. We got chilies. She laughed. You're going to puke it all up. I see it now. Sam stood straight and patted his stomach. Iron through and through. Might stink in a couple hours, though. She slapped him. Gross. He hugged his family close as they stepped out of the lab into the zoo. The preserver looked up from a wiggling creature he was operating on. He focused all 3 eyes on the humans as they walked down the path. After a moment, he turned back to focus on his work. Orbit? Yes, preserver? Update your notes. I got a new scan and sample of Sam in case anything ever happens to him. Logged. Thank you, preserver. It was needing done. No need for thanks, he said, slicing into the thin membrane surround his subject's torso.